We're good.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. All right. All right. We'll do approval of minutes for the August 14th meeting.
I'll move approval. They look good to me.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, make sure you're speaking into your microphone because I'm not hearing you back over the speakers, so we aren't getting anything.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll move on to oral communications. This section is if you have something that you'd like to discuss that is not on the agenda tonight, now would be your time to bring that up. Okay, looks like we will close oral communications. We'll open a public hearing and we'll start with 1621 Broadway LLC Cannabis Retail Facility.
I'm the second planning department. No, actually, I'm Council Chambers. No. Yeah, you shared your own screen. You click on Council Chambers. Yeah, they have to let share my screen. Yeah. You just make me a co-host. Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Things out of your control.
Hello, Commissioners. I'm Assistant Planner Smith, and the project before you for your consideration is the 1621 Broadway LLC Cannabis Retail Facility. There. No. I apologize. 1 second.
It's gonna be a night of technical difficulties, apparently.
Okay, thank you, Commissioners. So the project before you for your consideration is the 1621 Broadway LLC Cannabis Retail Facility located at 1621 Broadway and 1561 Broadway. This is a conditional use permit and the adoption of the initial study and mitigated negative declaration. Here's a bird's eye view of the project location. You can see that the project site is located in the western portion of Eureka along the Broadway corridor. Zooming in closer, you can see that the project site is a 2-parcel site located on the eastern portion of Broadway, south of West 15th Street and north of West Wabash Avenue. Here is a street view that you can see the project site from August 2019 Google Street View facing southeast, and then an updated street view of the project site facing north, slightly northeast from July of 2022. The proposed use is a cannabis retail facility located within an existing commercial building and the adjacent parking lot. The project proposes to have both car-side and in-store pickup of product. Site improvements will include fencing and gates, parking lot striping, bicycle parking, and landscaping in pots. The land use designation for the site is general commercial, and the site is zoned service commercial. Cannabis retail uses in the service commercial zone require a conditional use permit, and all conditional use permits require a coastal development permit. Different project. Sorry. No coastal development permit required. Okay, so this site is listed as a North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board cleanup site, which means that this project could not qualify for a CEQA exemption, which required the project to have an initial study and a mitigated negative declaration, part of which was a mitigation and monitoring reporting program. In the mitigation and monitoring reporting program, there were 3 mitigation measures identified related to cultural resources, and 1 mitigation measure identified for hazardous material, which required the adherence to the soil and groundwater management plan that was prepared for the project. And there was 1 response to comment received during the 30-day comment period from the Department of Cannabis Control, and a response to comment was prepared. The comment just asked that the city convey to the applicant that when they do submit their application for their cannabis license, that they also submit with that any plans or any supplemental reports or building plans with their cannabis license, and the applicant has been informed of that. So based on all the findings in the staff report and the discussion here in this presentation, staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution adopting the mitigated negative declaration, mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and response to comment, and approving the project with conditions. I have a suggested motion here, but I will stop screen sharing to allow for the public hearing.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
I have one question about the, it sounded like there was some engagement with Caltrans on the encroachment and some of the frontage improvements and the gating. Can you kind of go over how that was resolved? It sounded like pushing some stuff back was necessary.
Yes, so the applicant has, since those comments were received from Caltrans, the applicant modified the project site and the plans to move the fencing back far enough from the sidewalk from Caltrans's right away.
Are there any, I saw the new sidewalks. Is there any changes that we're aware of to the frontage that are happening along the Broadway corridor currently? Is there anything likely to change with this?
Not that I'm aware of. You mean sidewalk improvements that are currently happening along Broadway? Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
And then were the tanks removed from the site? I'm guessing they were. I mean, it's okay if you don't know the answer, but it seemed like sometimes it can be a little nebulous on the EnviroStore database when you're looking at the status of cleanup. Sometimes it's not actually cleaned up, but it's just been a long enough time that they consider it okay.
I see that Caitlin's going off of mute. Caitlin, do you know if the tanks were removed?
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to figure out how to raise my hand. I can help clarify. I was at the site visit with Caltrans. They do not have any sidewalk improvements planned in this frontage right now. They had concerns about the driveways, the original plan. They had concerns with the driveways. Then we met on site and they requested, after some discussion, the ingress egress was modified, right? So 1 lane in, 1 lane out. What you see now, Caltrans did approve. They also had concerns with the site distance visibility with the fencing being in the vision clearance area and being close to the property line. So it was moved back 5 feet to meet their concerns as well. And then as far as the tanks, yes, the tanks were removed. A remedial action was completed in 2010. When the county closed the case, they were supposed to do a soil and groundwater management plan because there was a little bit of residual contamination, but not enough to not close the site. And then when we started this process, I noticed that soil and ground management plan was a condition or was recommended for closure, but the water board was supposed to take over management of the site for that portion of for the post cleanup work, right? The soil and groundwater management plan. So then they had that prepared and approved by the water board during this permitting process. So, and they are aware that they are going to have to put in some fencing and they were going to do some landscaping, but we determined that they could just put landscaping in planter boxes so they didn't have to dig in the ground more, but there will be some ground disturbance for the fencing. I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Any other questions? All right, we will open it up for a public hearing. Generally, if the applicant's here and would like to speak, they would be welcome to do so first. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name and city of residence.
Do I have to speak, or nope, you do not have to. Do you need me to say anything? I'm more than happy to. No, it's fine. If you have any questions.
Do you just want to come up and introduce yourself and then say if you have any questions, you're willing to answer them? That way it's on the record.
Good evening. My name is Val. And if you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you.
No?
Thank you. I don't see any hand raised on Zoom either. All right, so we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to commissioners for a motion and discussion.
I'll be happy to make a motion, and I don't have any questions, but I do have a thought or two for discussion.
Can you bring that motion back up on the screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to adopt a mitigated negative declaration, mitigation monitoring and reporting program, and response to comment, and conditionally approve a cannabis retail use at 1621 and 1561 Broadway.
I'll second that.
So, on any of the local media, take Loco, for example, and in our own discussions here at the commission, there's kind of this, how much cannabis retail do we need issue that comes up again and again, and we've got a generally contracting industry at the moment. I'd be interested, maybe a few months down the line, but to have a report from cannabis staff on what the trends they're seeing in licensing, how the retailers that we've approved over the past 3 years have done, that kind of thing. I'm not really attached to this particular project. I'm happy to vote to approve this one, but I do think some additional, coming back to that late fall, early next year, somewhere in that time frame would be useful.
Any other further comment or discussion here?
I guess I'll just sympathize. That seems reasonable given that we're starting to see them building up to a larger number than maybe has ever existed. We know that. And I can remember a time when it was something of much more of a capped kind of discussion, which was abandoned some years ago, but it's not a bad idea to kind of be circumspect about it at this point, I think, and see how things are going. So I think that's a good idea.
There is a lot of research about businesses in high density and the success of that. And so I'm sure that there is maybe some of that we can touch on when we speak of that. But there is research definitely to kind of show that they are more successful in groups. So I'm all for it. Do you have, by chance, to know the number of retail licensed retailers in city?
Yeah, and I do have a slide prepared at the end of the presentation just to give you guys a visual of it. I'll click to the next slide. So this is a map that I prepared of the operating cannabis retail facilities. You see all the way down to the south, we have Papa Barkley. The 3 in red, those are permitted but not operational. The ones in green are permitted and operational. And the 2 in yellow on the far right-hand side, those are permitted and operational, but they're just outside of city limits. It's my estimation right now that we have 9 operating cannabis retail facilities within the city limits.
Thanks. That's good information.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Are we ready to go to a vote? You want to do a roll call vote?
Excuse me. Get to the right screen. Okay. Commissioner Lazar,
Yes.
Commissioner Freitas,
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft,
Aye.
and Commissioner Meyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. We will move to F2 on the agenda, Woo Ginger Restaurant.
Yeah. I accidentally forgot my scripts upstairs, so thank you guys while I fumble through these a little bit. I think I know what I'm doing here. All right, so thanks, commissioners. This project for your consideration is the Woo Ginger Restaurant. This is a conditional use permit and coastal development permit for a restaurant at 1835 4th Street. Here is a bird's eye view of the project location. You can see that the project site is located in the northeast portion of the city. Zooming in closer yet, you can see the 0.45 acre site is located on the north side of 4th Street or Highway 101 South, south of 3rd Street, west of T Street, and east of S Street. Here's a street view of the project site looking north, and the site was previously occupied by China Buffet. The applicant proposes to utilize an existing 4,400 square foot commercial building for a restaurant that was historically used as a restaurant. The site also contains 39 parking spaces total, which includes 2 parking spaces that are accessible for Americans with disability, comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. It is important to note that although this site was historically used as a restaurant, it was a non-conforming use. It had not previously obtained a conditional use permit or a coastal development permit. And because the site was not occupied for a time period of 90 days or more, that means that it now needs to comply with our permitting procedures, which means it requires a conditional use permit and coastal development permit at this time. I'll go back a little bit. There are some site improvements proposed. They are proposing to re-sign the ADA parking spaces. They are going to remove some seating at the bar area on the inside of the restaurant, also upgrade the bathroom on the interior of the building so that it is ADA compliant, and then do some general landscaping improvements on the exterior. There is an existing pole at the site, and a sign has been installed on the top of that pole. This sign was installed without the benefit of permits or reviews, so the applicant will be required to obtain a sign permit and associated building permit, and the use permit and development permit has been conditioned as such. So you can see that the site is located in the coastal zone, and the land use designation is highway service commercial, with the zoning district being service commercial. A restaurant in the service commercial zone does require a conditional use permit, and all conditional use permits in the coastal zone require a coastal development permit as well. As I mentioned before, the site was historically used as a restaurant, but again, because continuous use lapsed for greater than 90 days, we have to reestablish with proper permits. So based on all the information presented here in this presentation and the findings in the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and approving the project with conditions. And I have a suggested motion here, but I can stop screen sharing to allow for public hearing.
Thank you for your report. Any questions for staff?
I have one. Will the sign need to go through a design review process, or is that ministerial?
The sign permit will not need to go through design review. It will be an administrative sign permit, but I think even so, we've updated the sign code so signs that aren't ministerial still don't have to go through design review. Is that correct?
If it meets the sign standards, it gets an administrative sign permit.
There we go.
On whether this does?
It looks small enough, and we know pole signs are permitted in the SC, so my hope is that it meets the standards. If it doesn't, then they can apply for a creative sign permit and go to design review committee for a deviation. But I think it's small enough just from a look.
I guess my question would be, it was non-conforming because it didn't have a use permit originally or a coastal permit?
Yes.
Nothing about the structure as far as setbacks or parking or the use itself would be otherwise non-conforming?
No. It's just that a use of this type would require a use permit, and it's non-conforming because that use permit was not previously obtained.
Since we're talking about non-conforming, since this is in the coastal zone, how does this differ from the policy that would be governing it in the inland code?
In the inland code, I think you get more time before a use lapses, but it's a similar situation.
I guess kind of a follow-up question to that. In the new proposed LCP, would a restaurant be a principally permitted use in the relevant zone district?
Definitely.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, maybe not a drive-through, but yeah, a restaurant like this.
Any further questions? All right, I will open it for public hearing. As a reminder, you have 3 minutes and state your name. If the applicant's here, they are welcome to come speak first.
My name is Pat McDonald, and I'm very good friends with Jack Wu, and I called him this evening to see if he was going to need help with his presentation, and he says, I won't be there tonight, I'm in China. So I'm here to help him and answer questions if I can.
Okay, thank you. We'll let you know.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any hands on Zoom there. No. All right. We'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for motion and discussion.
I drive past this restaurant every day, and I'm thrilled to see that something's going into it. It seems, probably it was an unpleasant surprise for the applicant to realize that they had to go through this process. I feel motivated to make it easy for them, so I'm happy to make the motion and see if we can get a second for furthering the process. I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and conditionally approving a conditional use permit and coastal development permit for restaurant use at 1835 4th Street.
I'll second.
Further discussion before we go to vote?
I'll just add that, I'll just echo what D'Lo said. I'm thrilled to see a good use going in there too.
Agreed. All right, roll call vote.
Commissioner Lazar,
Yes.
Commissioner Freitas,
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft,
Yes.
And Commissioner Meyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving right along to F3, Humboldt Association of Realtors Office and Event Space.
Due to our technical difficulties, I have to go tag Lisa out, so she'll be down in just a second.
Lisa, if you can hear us, come downstairs.
Good evening, Commissioners. This evening we have an application from Humboldt County Association of Realtors, or HAR, for a conditional use permit and coastal development permit to convert a former theater into offices and event space at 220 First Street. Can I use the clicker? Okay. Okay. Here's the general project location. Zooming in, the red rectangle shows the property location. The subject parcel is located in the middle of the block between C and D streets, and on the south side of First Street facing Humboldt Bay. The property can be accessed from both First Street and Snug Alley. Here's the storefront looking south from First Street. HAR plans to remodel the interior and repair, regrout, seal, and repaint the exterior, including the front facade where a mural is currently painted. No expansion of the building is proposed, and no ground disturbing activity is anticipated. HAR plans to engage a local artist to paint a mural on the building side adjacent to the public parking lot. Here's the proposed floor plan. The primary office hours will be Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Based on the current operation at the Wabash location, foot traffic on an average week is 150 to 200 people, and according to the applicant, the foot traffic may increase to 300 to 350 people at the new location. Under HAR's proposal, the building will be used as an office space, including reception, offices, and a small conference room. It'll have an updated restroom and a kitchenette break room. In addition, there will be a retail component at the front of the building offering real estate products such as local area maps and brochure boxes, as well as local products such as art and jewelry for sale. The project will also include an open event space or meeting hall for up to 99 occupants. The office space will be staffed with 3 full-time staff members who support a membership of 750 individuals consisting of real estate brokers, agents, and affiliates. The event space will be open for Old Town events, including Arts Alive. Additional uses of the event space will include HAR committee meetings, educational classes, and general membership meetings. The site has a core retail commercial land use designation, is zoned waterfront commercial, and is located in the coastal zone. Offices and event space in the CW zone district require a conditional use permit. And since the site is located in the coastal zone, the conditionally permitted use also requires a CDP. The proposed office's location on the ground floor or street level and the proposed additional use of the space for retail and community events is crucial to finding consistency with the land use designation. Therefore, a condition has been added requiring that as long as the building is occupied by a conditional office use, there must be a visitor serving component that is regularly open for drop-in visitors and customers with goods for sale, art for viewing, and or informational materials available for the general public. And a second use has been added requiring the space be used for active participation in at least 50% of major community events in Old Town, such as Arts Live, Friday night markets, etc. As conditioned, the proposed uses will be consistent with the core retail commercial land use designation. The recommendation is, well, as described in the staff report, staff believes the necessary findings can be made to approve the office and event space, for the CUP and CDP. And I have a recommendation when you're ready, and I'm available to answer questions. And I also think the CEO from HAR is available to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
I'm curious about the visitor serving part, and so probably I'm happy to have staff answer the question or the applicant. So it sounds to me like the retail piece will be open on regular hours, and the meeting space will be used for a number of bigger events. Are there other times that meeting space would be available for community use, or is it limited to when there are events in Old Town?
I think that'd be a good question for the applicant.
I think so.
I can answer that for you. Hi, I'm Kristen Kelly. I'm the CEO of the Humboldt Association of Realtors. We have the meeting space that will be available during work time hours, but special accommodations can be made, like if there's outside of the association membership that wanted to reserve space for that meeting place at any other kind of meetings or special events and stuff. So it would be consideration and available.
All right, appreciate it.
I have a question on condition D, participation in community events. Could we hear a little bit about how that condition, was negotiated with the applicant, and if that's typical for uses in this zone? It seems kind of hard to enforce, and I'm just curious to know why it was suggested.
The applicant's narrative, which I think is included, talks about how they are wanting to participate in community events. And then we looked back at the last time a ground floor office was proposed and approved by the Planning Commission, and one of the conditions was 50% of events. So we just kept that, and in keeping it, we realized that it is kind of a difficult one to understand and enforce. I think it would be obvious if there was no participation, and it's kind of a gray area what 50% means.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with it as long as the applicant is fine with it. I doubt we're going to be doing stakeouts, outside, making sure that but I was just curious to know, if there was any concern or request for clarification from the applicant on that. I'm sure we could think through some other ways to further clarify it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I was pretty skeptical too about the enforceability, but because of the nature of the organization, I took more comfort in that, really, frankly, than the likelihood that we're going to be able to hold them accountable. More like they'll just do it naturally. I am interested, though. Commissioner Kraft raised a good point about the theater space that will be the meeting space, I think. Do we know whether there'll be a change in occupancy? I imagine it's a Class A occupancy, given the nature of its prior use.
It's currently Class A, and talking with the applicant's consultant, Sarah Atkins, I think they're keeping it that way, and then the offices would be accessory to this assembly use. At least that's what they're proposing to building.
Because I think it'd be similarly hard to require that they make the space available. I think it's a good idea, but I think keeping it Class A is probably the strongest thing that will ensure its usability. Because once it goes from that, it's going to be hard to make it open to public events that have high concentrations of people. I guess I'd be interested if the applicant would be willing to kind of commit to having that remain in that occupancy as part of the project.
So you're talking about the front area for the 99 and under portion of the facility?
Yeah, I'm imagining the former theater space for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much occupying the same design of what the theater had. The bathrooms are like in the middle section, and then from there back, the office staff would be back there in a conference room. So that was the general thing. Like the 220 First Street would have the doorway and use for the events and education classes and anything of the larger capacity for that. So it'd be that open space with the art on the wall and stuff like that. So if any visitors do come in, then they're kind of greeted in a gallery style room with some little retail stuff in the front window area. And then they have that open space that when we rent that out, then they have that access point there that's kind of a little tiny separated from the office space in the back. So that's the plan, is to keep that up and have that available. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I'm looking at the floor plan right now. I guess I'm thinking of the event space primarily, not the office space. So just that space, keeping that a Class A.
That was the whole intention of it. So yeah.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Bryn Coriel. I'm the president of the Humboldt Association of Realtors this year. So volunteer. I own Coldwell Banker Sellers Realty in Arcata. But yeah, to add to what Kristen's saying, with our 750 members, we often have upwards of 20 meetings per month. So with 21 business days in a month, we're very frequently meeting. Thus, the foot traffic, we're going to have anywhere from, meetings of 6 people up to 25 people. And then quarterly, we have our general membership meetings. That's where we'll be utilizing this space of 99 people. It's not uncommon for us to have other events throughout the year, fellowship events and just community events where we hope to bring more of the public in. But we tried to leave the front half of the building as kind of a flex space to do whatever the community really wants or needs in the years coming. The space that we're currently occupying on West Wabash is very much more of an old kind of craftsman-y Victorian house, and we've worked with it, but it's not really an event space by any means. And even the conference room we've had is very small. So in making this move, our hope is that we can not rent out as many group spaces throughout the county for our different events, but be able to host them ourselves, but also just be an asset to the community for any needs that may arise. So, yeah.
And I think just to add to that, we had thought that they would want to change the occupancy to office, but they said, no, we want to keep it assembly for less than 100 is what it's at now.
Well, that gives me good comfort, and it seems like spaces like that are useful, even and honestly, under this moving forward, I would imagine the building is going to be used at a higher level than it was under NCRT, or not NCRT. What was it? Is it NCRT? Redwood Curtain, yeah, because they can only have so many plays so often, and so I think there's a good sweet spot. It could be a real win-win, especially if it remains available.
I just want to say a couple of things that I appreciate. One, appreciate that you're adding a mural, since that one mural's going away. I like that a lot. And probably like a lot of people who moved to Humboldt County as adults, I met the two of the first probably 5 people I met in Humboldt County were Humboldt Association of Realtors members, including Tina Christensen. So shout out, long time. Glad to see what you're doing here.
Further questions for staff before we open it up for public hearing? All right, we'll open it up for the public. Again, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name. You're welcome to speak again.
I'm Bryn if you have any questions.
Thanks. No. All right, we'll close for the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for a motion and discussion.
I'll be happy to make the motion.
I can second.
I move the Planning Commission adopt a resolution finding the project is exempt from CEQA and conditionally approving a conditional use permit and coastal development permit for an office and event space at 220 First Street. And Commissioner Freitas seconded.
Further discussion? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Lazar,
Yes.
Commissioner Freitas,
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft,
Aye.
and Commissioner Meyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. We will move to F4 for a September 2023 Inland Zoning Code update.
Okay, that's me. Okay. Tonight I'm presenting a zoning code update. This is the 5th modification of the text amendment that adopted the current zoning code in 2019. This amendment applies to the inland portion of the city, which is the brightly colored area on this map. The blue line delineates the coastal zone. So everything outside of the coastal zone within city limits. And it's chapter 155 of our municipal code, and it was comprehensively updated in June of 2019. And then we've had 4 cleanup amendments, 3 in June of every following year, plus 1 in January of 2022, which was prompted by the passage of SB 9 and the need to bring our code into compliance with that state law. So as staff uses the code day to day and applies the code to project applications and inquiries, we identify and take notes of things we'd like to see changed. And these things generally fall into the following categories: fixing errors like incorrect references to other code sections, correcting inconsistencies where 2 code sections appear to conflict, improving readability, such as by adding cross-references for ease of navigation, addressing omissions, such as realizing a common type of use doesn't seem to fit neatly into one of the use type categories in the code, resolving questions of interpretation. For instance, when we have a long debate about the meaning of a code section, that tips us off we need to add some clarification. Addressing unintended outcomes of code application that are contrary to the code's intent, and addressing inconsistencies with state law. And in this case, we're proposing some changes to ensure compliance with state regulation of ADUs, accessory dwelling units, family daycare homes, and emergency shelters. And there's a few changes in the current proposed amendment to help the city earn a pro-housing designation with the state. including by setting ourselves a deadline of 45 days to review and approve a complete application for an accessory dwelling unit. So the changes are enumerated in attachments 2 and 3 of the agenda item. Some of the changes of note are we're proposing to add a new indoor commercial recreation use type that covers things like movie theaters and bowling alleys. Increasing the project valuation trigger for correcting non-conforming site features yearly based on inflation. This was in the original code, and then we removed the inflation increase, and now we're proposing to put it back. So we're kind of going back and forth on that one. Making use permits a trigger for correcting non-conforming site features, as well as the project valuation trigger. Making micro shared housing principally permitted in mixed use zones, similar to how we principally permit other residential use types and commercial lodging. Allowing emergency shelters in the public facilities district. Allowing resource protection and restoration in more districts. Changing the vehicle repair use type to vehicle cleaning and repair, because we realized that vehicle cleaning wasn't a primary use anywhere, so you couldn't just have a standalone car wash. Allowing an administrative adjustment for deviations from outdoor lighting standards for creative accent lighting, because currently the standards require that all lighting be directed downwards, and sometimes people want lighting to be directed at stuff. Prohibit outdoor lighting encroachment into habitat areas. Right now our code is just saying don't encroach on other people's properties, and so people with that are on Gulch Greenways, they don't think there's a problem with projecting far into their backyard, but we want to also protect habitat from lighting impacts. Adding an objective design standard requiring shielding of mechanical equipment, and removing certain design standards that were added during the last code update for tiny houses on wheels, since we haven't gotten any interest in tiny houses on wheels. So we're wondering if we remove some of the design standards, if that would help lower the bar to hopefully get more housing. Change that I wanted to touch on as well is a proposed removal of exempting housing projects of up to 4 units from subjective design review. Our code has objective design review standards that this housing would still be subject to, that we feel are strong enough to do the work of subjective design review. So I'm showing this example of a multifamily housing project on this road, and how this wouldn't be allowed by our current objective design standards, because they don't allow blank walls of 10 by 10 feet or larger fronting a street. They also require each street-facing side of the building to have an equivalent degree of detailing. So you couldn't have a really uninteresting side facing the street. Both sides have to have equal amounts of details. And then ground floor units need a prominent building entrance facing the street, connected to the sidewalk by a walkway. So if you have ground floor units with their own entries, those entries have to face the street. And surface parking is not allowed between a primary building and the street anymore. So parking needs to be tucked behind the building, and that really helps aesthetics as well. And we have much stronger standards for parking lot landscaping, including requirement for trees, and perimeter and interior landscaping. So all those things have been really helping improve the look of multifamily housing without the need for subjective design review. Oh, and native landscaping is required between the building and the sidewalk by our code. So based on what I just talked about and all the information in the staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Commission hold a public hearing and adopt a resolution recommending council approve the amendment.
Thank you. Questions for staff?
I was trying to find micro shared housing in the code. Is it defined?
Yeah, so micro shared housing is when the units don't have their own kitchen and bathroom, like they'll share like a lodging house situation.
Not like a single room occupancy, but like a group, like a.
I can read you the definition. What's the use type called again? Sorry.
Micro/shared housing.
Micro shared housing. Shared living quarters without separate kitchen or bathroom facilities for each room or unit, offered for rent to permanent or semi-transient residents for long-term occupancy. Includes rooming and boarding houses, single room occupancy houses, housing, dormitories, convents, and monasteries, and other types of organizational housing.
Is this an HCD term, or is this something that we've always had?
I believe it's just a term that we've developed in this new 2019 zoning code to cover these types of uses that are not short-term, they're long-term uses.
I gotcha. So, yeah. So it kind of covers all the kind of unconventional long-term housing scenarios, from SROs to dormitory, group quarter kind of things. Okay. And then I guess if I heard you right, when you were talking about the removal of the design review requirement for 4 units or less, we're not adding objective standards. We're saying that we feel like the objective standards that are in place are sufficient to cover to ensure development will be harmonious.
Correct.
Okay. I think those are my 2 first questions. I guess, are there certain things was there like a certain number of items that had to be tackled to try to shoot for this pro-housing classification? Or
Yeah, the pro-housing application, you have to get 30 points to get it in 4 categories, and you have to get points in each category. And Lisa actually is our coordinator on it. And so some of the stuff in here we promised we would do as part of our application, like the moving from 60 days to 45 days for the accessory dwelling unit applications. When we met with HCD staff about our code, they were not pleased to see that we had discretionary subjective design review, and they gave us grief about it. And the historic preservation review, any subjective review that triggers, they were less is will make them happier. So, and in addition to just getting the 30 points to get it, which we think we might be able to do with some updates, the more points you get over that, the more likely you'll get more money from them during funding opportunities in the future.
Yeah, that was my other question. I knew there was something. So yeah, it's referenced, I think, in the staff report that some things that involve ADUs on properties with historical structures will be exempt, but I wasn't clear on what those were. Is there an easy way to differentiate?
Sure, yeah. Right now, with Historic Preservation Commission, we only take exterior alterations to historic pres that are visible from public vantage points. So the idea was to identify accessory dwelling units that that wouldn't be visible from public. So if it's like an internal conversion with no exterior modifications, that doesn't need to go to Historic Preservation Commission. if it is an attachment to an existing historic structure that's not visible from the public right-of-way, due to like the building obstructing the view of it, not landscaping or something ephemeral, then it would need to go to historic pres. And then the third one is a new detached ADU. Would not need to go to historic pres.
Aha. Dilo, does that give you any nervousness? I'm not sure I care, but
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't dug into it too deeply, but would there be any objective standards proposed specifically for ADUs on historic properties? You know, like compatibility of roof pitch or window type or anything like that?
I definitely think it's a good idea to have it on my to-do list to look into getting more objective standards or getting any objective standards for historic preservation because of things like all these federal and state laws that preempt us from having subjective discretionary review. But that's not in place yet. Based on my reading of 65852.2, the current ADU state law, I think we could require historic preservation review for new detached ADUs unless they fall under Section E, the 800 square foot or smaller detached. So if we feel uncomfortable with this, we could limit it to the 800 square feet or less. New detached ADUs wouldn't need to go to Historic Preservation Commission and still be in compliance with state law.
Yeah, I guess for my part, I would be comfortable moving forward with what's proposed, but maybe if I make the motion, I might add a recommendation to explore objective standards for historic structures that would not have been exempt as maybe part of a larger objective standards overhaul for historic structures, just to take some of the guesswork out of it for applicants. I do appreciate the intent, and I don't think it's the wrong direction to go, but I think there might be some pretty low-hanging fruit, just for ensuring some compatibility, or at least for some properties that maybe there's more interest in keeping them more compatible than others, but you also don't want to create a false sense of history. So there's a lot kind of to unpack with that. And I look forward to exploring it more later.
yeah, I guess I'll just follow up and say that I can imagine some scenarios where, it could have a bad consequence not having trigger for discretion, like if you had a large front yard in front of a historical structure and then somebody proposed a detached ADU that would then interfere with the streetscape, you wouldn't want that, if it were other types of development. So there's a room for developing some things to help guide development pattern. And in some cases it may be there are different camps when it comes to these things, where some people want it to look extremely different from what it is nearby so that you don't have the false sense of history, and other people like to marry it, and that's where a Historic Preservation Commission can kind of weigh those. And then sometimes an attached unit might be preferred than a detached because it would conserve the total building footprint and intrusiveness of the development. But I think I'm comfortable moving forward, but I think, I agree with Commissioner Freitas that it would be a good target to try to design some objective standards if we're going to eliminate the historic preservation review. Would you say, if I was hearing you right, the E section would mean that if it was under 800 square feet that it would be off limits?
That's my reading of it.
Yeah, that whole government code section is so squiggly. But yeah, I do think that there would be some ability to set objective standards for ADUs. I think we would retain that authority. That's the way I've interpreted it in the past.
You have more questions over there, Commissioner Lazar?
All I got.
It is really nice that we can lean on you sometimes for some technical knowledge over there. So I appreciate you guys carrying the load there. Okay, well, we'll open it to a public hearing, which I do not see anyone in attendance, and I don't see those either. Okay, so we will close that public hearing and bring it back to the commissioners for a motion and discussion, and it sounds like a motion is in the works.
First off, I just wanted to say I'm glad to see the inflation adjustment come back to the trigger for improvements. I actually had that on my list of bringing that back up next time we do this. And I know there had been other commissioners interested in, in bringing that back, or at least having that in the first place. I think Commissioner Kraft, I remember you had brought that up in the past. So I think that is the right choice with, a year to think about it. So it's great that we do this every year. And like I said, I'd be happy to make a motion and include a recommendation for some, discussion about objective standards for ADUs on properties with historic structures. So I'm happy to make that or hear any other suggested additions to the motion.
I'm comfortable with that. I would just say that Pasadena tends to be pretty ahead of most of the state when it comes to these things because they have such an abundance of historical resources. And I've certainly been to a few trainings in the past down there, so I'd be surprised if they didn't have some things that could be kind of plagiarized or reappropriated.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they do. I think actually we've looked to them. Okay, I move the Plan and Commission adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve the proposed September 2023 Inland Zoning Code update and recommend that within the next calendar year there is discussion or research done and brought back to the Commission on potential objective design standards for historic properties, which could be incorporated into next year's update.
I'll second.
Further discussions or amendments to the motion? All right, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Yeah. Commissioner Lazar,
Yes.
Commissioner Freitas,
Yes.
Commissioner Kraft,
Aye.
and Chairwoman Meyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you. We're moving right along. Good job, everybody. We're going to move into old business and hear what our subcommittee had to say.
So I volunteered to take on this report. We did meet, and the we would be Commissioner Lazar, myself, with Director Kenyon. Previous to that, I did a little bit of research, and side note for either General Counsel or you, Kristen, is what would be an appropriate way to get the statistics to Commissioner Benson, since I want to be sure we don't do Brown Act stuff. But he was the one that was most interested in that. In any case, I'll highlight a few of the statistics that we came up with. Director Kenyon came up with some census data on what percentage of Eureka's housing stock is owner-occupied and not. And so based on that and the estimate of 142 both permitted and unpermitted vacation rentals, that's about 2.5% of the rental stock. Commissioner Benson has made a point of saying, he's looked at the marketing materials and seen a lot of vacation rentals and pretty tight long-term rentals. And that is in fact true, but it's also the case that vacation rentals are kind of continually marketed if they're active. So it can be a little bit misleading. However, it's just a tight market. I asked Eris Trutna, who is the owner of Rentor, and they've got about 5% of Humboldt County's rental stock under property management. They're concentrated in the Humboldt Bay and Eureka areas, so it would be a higher percentage for here. It's not going to be entirely representative, but I think it's a statistic that we can hang our hats on as much as any. And so they're seeing rental costs of about $2,200 a month for 3-bedroom, 2-bath units, and about a little under $1,400 a month for 2 ones. Did a little bit of work on looking at the census data on what our local incomes are, household incomes. And if you look at the old school, you should pay no more than 1/3 of your income on housing. That would mean that the average person renting a 2-1 unit or the average household renting a 2-1 would be over $49,000 a year, where our average household income is a little over $43,000 a year. Not a lot of delinquencies, at least for the property management company that I spoke with. Not a lot of vacancies. 3 weeks on the market is pretty tight too, so they're turning around quickly. So all of that points to a tight rental market with affordability issues. Commissioner Benson was interested in what we could learn about the impact of vacation rental listings on housing prices. And as I suspected, local data is just not available. But there is some national research that suggests that a 10% increase in VBRO type listings causes an increase of about 0.42% in price. And you say, well, that doesn't sound so bad. But if we went from, let's say, 140 to 280 vacation rental units, which wouldn't be a terrible stretch over a couple of years, you would be talking about a 4% increase, and that would be for that family renting a 3-2 unit, a little over $90 a month. So based on our incomes, that is significant. So those were the statistics that we had. We talked a little bit about, and I will move quickly from here, Commissioner Freitas, I promise. We found ourselves talking a little bit about 2 related but separate issues. One is the overall percentage of properties, and one is the density of those properties in blocks and neighborhood. And it was our common sense understanding or assessment that we don't have an overall issue. And then using the city staff's data on Google Maps, we were able to drill in a little closer on the clustering, and it was pretty rare to have multiple units within a couple hundred feet. It did happen in 2 or 3 spots, and Director Kenyon has subsequently gotten us the best mapping that she could get on unpermitted units. We haven't looked at those yet. How they cluster, but just a quick eyeball look to me said that they didn't cluster a ton either. So that was an issue I was concerned about, and it looks less real than I thought it might have been. There are some other ways to do this, and permitting paths that we could find. So, for cannabis permitting, for example, we're looking at something within a certain distance from schools and churches and that kind of thing. So there may be some ways that are not terribly difficult to implement that should the city decide to go forward with a cap, that you could still address that neighborhood block face kind of issue one way or another. The 3 of us, as we talked, we're not in favor of hurrying to implement some kind of cap. We do think that 1 is likely to be a good idea. Correct me if I'm saying that wrong for any of the 3 of you, or 2 or 3 of us. it is envisioned in our current code for inland residential zones. That makes a lot of sense, and it's where the permitted units were for the most part. It's also the case that, you know, the hotels and stuff tend to be in the coastal zone, and so there's just more lodging activity in those places. Staff workload is a real limitation, and I think phasing this out will make this thing that is a priority for our commission, and we're going to recommend a priority for the city, but not something that is going to drop on the staff right away, especially if we come to having a cap where it is either close to the number of units that we have currently or less, or otherwise makes people do a land rush to get their application in. Commissioner Lazar talked a little bit about the rush on cannabis permitting that the county went through, and heroic efforts, we don't need to set that up here. The three of us found ourselves not liking the current situation where an approval for a vacation rental runs with the land, and some kind of licensing that is renewed based on use, based on, you know, a lack of complaints, that kind of stuff would be a good longer-term way to go. Similar to what we were talking about a little bit ago, objective standards are preferable to subjective ones for us. Commissioner Lazar led us a little bit in talking about kind of personas of people who might have a vacation rental, and the person that we found ourselves cheering for most was an older person who owns a historic property, wants to stay in that property, and is renting a room and is on site. You know, she's awesome. And then we have on the far end a soulless corporation from out of the area that's trying to crush our local population. They're bad, and that we would like to incent and help her and de-incentivize and not help them. And of course, the devil will be in that continuum in the middle. Part of our project is to make a recommendation to the city council. We're not there yet, but our thought is that, you know, again, phasing it out, if we could make it a priority for staff to finish the compliance drive in the next couple of quarters, say, I'm making that up, then Director Kenyon thought she could devote some of her time and staff resources to this other parts of this in 2024 with code changes potentially for 2025, or, you know, if a cap, not in the next year after that. And then the other thing that the council may or may not be aware of that I would envision as part of this report is just to say, you know, this is simmering in some neighborhoods. There is some disharmony that our elected officials should be aware of. So that's my download. Director Kenyon, Commissioner Lazar, if you want to help fill it in, please do.
I think you did a really good job, Michael, of summarizing and covering a lot of the ground that we discussed. So I'm not going to try to muddy those waters. I think it was pretty good.
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. So, you know, I think from here, the ad hoc committee can probably get together one more time and craft a shorter version of what I just did for the council and get that on their agenda. Again, not a rush, so I think we would bring it back here for your formal support in then a meeting or two, and then go forward from there.
Sounds good. Thank you for your guys' extra time on that.
Yeah, I also wanted to just echo thanks to both of you for making the time and for providing such a thorough report, and for staff for supporting that work as well. And yeah, I look forward to the letter. And I think the other thing just to keep in mind for the commissioners, you know, if and when we have updates, that's going to obviously be really helpful. And in the meantime, just we'll have to do some soul searching about when people keep coming up and they keep being mad. What is that like? Are we prepared to just continue to kind of hold space for that anger and process the permits? So just, something to kind of be prepared for, because that's the way it's currently structured. And I think that that's okay, but it's just something to know will happen.
Yeah, on that one, we decided that it was okay as well. It's not comfortable. Clearly, it's a bigger pain point for us than for most. And it is legitimately a pain point for some of those residents. So that's what motivates me to want to put it on the council's radar for sure. But we did kind of say, given the things that we're trying to balance here, we're just going to have to suck it up for a little while longer.
It is hard when emotions are kind of moving against just what we're beholden to do, which is just uphold that code. So it doesn't look to me like when you're looking at this that the rental market for VRBOs is out of control or out of balance. But I think we can at the same time also recognize that there are availability issues with livable housing. So those two things can be both true. All right, so you guys are going to meet one more time and we'll report back at the October meeting.
What do you two think? Do you want to shoot for the October meeting, or should we give ourselves another month?
I think I think one of our conclusions was that it's not a hugely like a high priority, got to get this done tomorrow situation. So I think giving ourselves another month would be a good idea to sort of collect our thoughts, and then we can kind of set a time to hit the bullet points that you boil down from what you just presented.
Does that sound okay to you, Director Kennedy? Shoot for November?
Yes.
And I think that Commissioner Freda's point that it is uncomfortable, but the findings that we have to make for all projects, that was one of the points we made during the meeting, is that we have cover in the generalized findings that are applicable to all zoning codes. So if there's issues that would result in injuries to neighboring property owners, then we cite the evidence and deny the project. And if this doesn't fully comport to the requirements, or there's idiosyncratic issues about the site, we saw that we have the prerogative to deny a permit. So I think, as much as it's difficult, and it'd be nice if we could just hang it on a perfectly designed escape valve, we still have the ability to not approve projects when they're a poor fit. So I think we're okay in the near term.
All right, thank you. We will move on to new business, which I was under the impression there was some, but is not listed on our agenda.
Since it's not listed on our agenda, we shouldn't do anything. But under director report, I do have something to say.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, we'll move along to that then.
You all received an email today because the city is looking at acquiring property to relocate the corporation yard out of the sea level rise tsunami liquefaction zone. And an initial study has been done, and is going to be noticed for a 30-day notice of intent period this week. And Public Works would really like to go to council in November. So we were thinking if we could find a date in late October to come to Planning Commission. Planning Commission always has to do a general plan conformance review for acquisitions of city property. And so you wouldn't be adopting the CEQA document. You would just be reviewing it in making your recommendation about conformity. But looking at the times that I got back, that Raylene got back from everybody, I don't know if we have a time that works because we have some conflicts on. The only time I see is Monday, October 23rd, Chair Meyer said she was available, and Commissioner Lazar is available in that afternoon, and then Commissioner Kraft is available from just from 4:30 to 6:30. So I'm a little nervous about setting it for 4:30 if we don't get done in 2 hours.
Okay, truth in advertising, 6:30 is preferred. 4:30 is a hard start, but if we needed to go, if we needed to go into the night, I could do that.
Would Commissioner Lazar be able to get here for 4:30 on a Monday?
Especially, this is just going to be a special meeting for one project.
Just for the operations complex.
Yeah, I think I can make that work out. I'll be able to.
Is there a reason to believe that meeting would take 2 hours?
I just remember the Beta Zoo trail taking a long time. I mean, this one seems like a more straightforward. They're based on the CEQA document, and it's just one site versus a whole trail. So
It's not out. Is it out yet?
no, it's not out yet. It's going out this week.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when they were going to potentially locate at the old Jacobs campus, and I know one of the concerns of the neighbors at that time, having grown up in that neighborhood myself, was traffic. So I'm not, that'd be the only thing, that I could imagine there being some discussion around, frankly, but I guess we'll see when it's released.
Okay, so it sounds like we could try for the 23rd at 4:30. That's awesome. Thank you. And that's it for me for director report.
We discussed changing of the bylaws about some voting. Is that something that we are going to add to the agenda for the next meeting, or?
Correct. That'll be coming in at our October meeting.
Okay.
And I realized you all already voted to change the meeting time in November to Wednesday. So that's already been changed in the bylaws. But we're going to bringing forward a different change in the bylaws having to do with voting.
Next month.
Great.
Okay.
And it was November, right, that we're changing the meeting day to Wednesday? Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
So October will be Monday still.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right. Other reports and communications? No. All right. We'll move to adjournment. Thank you, everybody.